I checked all 206 Farming Simulator 25 maps available on ModHub and picked a strict top 10 from them. I was only interested in maps that truly stand out in some way, have their own atmosphere, and do not look like yet another copy-paste project. In this ranking, I only take into account maps from ModHub, meaning the ones that go through testing before being published. I also skipped the fantasy category, because that is a completely different type of map and it is hard to compare those with more classic projects. This ranking is not perfect, and you could probably argue with some of the choices, but I wanted it to be interesting, varied, and straight to the point. 10th place goes to Trout River Valley. Honestly, I have one problem with North American maps. There are a lot of them, but most of them are just average. A few fields, some buildings, and nothing more. They lack character and something that really catches your attention. Thankfully, Trout River Valley breaks away from that pattern. Even with its large fields, this map does not feel empty. There is terrain variation, vegetation, trees, and bushes, which makes the world feel alive instead of dead, and that is exactly what I expect from a map in a game. Even if someone says that this kind of landscape is less realistic, what matters more to me is whether it looks good and whether it actually feels enjoyable to drive around. Another highlight is the little island with the sell point and factories. It is a really interesting use of the ferry, and it does not feel like something forced in just for the sake of it, but rather like a natural part of the map. The farm itself is also solid. Maybe it is not outstanding, but it is definitely better than most. The main thing I would improve is the dirt roads, because compared to all the well-made vegetation, they look a bit underwhelming. Even so, Trout River Valley deserves a place in this ranking, because for a North American map, it has its own atmosphere and simply does not get boring. 9th place goes to Mediterranean Italy. The name alone already tells you what to expect, because this map takes us straight to Italy. And even though it technically belongs to the European maps category, in terms of atmosphere, it feels very different from most of them. It has its own distinct, typically Italian character that you can feel from the very first minutes. That said, this is not a flawless map. The biggest downside is that some elements feel a bit too perfect. You can see it in the vegetation placed too neatly, trees planted almost in a straight line, and a few fields that are simply too angular. There is not a lot of it, but at times it adds a slight sense of artificiality. Thankfully, the strengths matter more. The roads are done very well, especially the ones that look like simple tire tracks in the dirt, because they add a lot of atmosphere to the map. Then there is the large, well-designed farm that genuinely fits the surroundings. Only in one spot the fenced area ends in a strange way, and it clashes a little with the rest. But apart from that, Mediterranean Italy is simply very pleasant to look at and definitely deserves a place in this ranking. Pallegney is a map that will especially appeal to people who like the atmosphere of the base game's Riverbend Springs, because it reminds me of it very strongly. If I had to describe it in one word, I would say solid. There is nothing here that really stands out in a negative way, but there are not many moments that create a real wow effect either. What stands out the most are the dirt roads, because for once they do not look like another identical template. You can see tire marks, a bit of life, and because of that the map gains a lot more atmosphere. You could slightly criticize some of the fields because they can be a bit angular, but that would already be nitpicking. Pallegney is simply a solid and visually pleasing map. If you liked Riverbend Springs but after hundreds of hours want something similar in a fresher version, then there is a good chance you will feel right at home here. Lunow is the perfect map for people who like huge machines and even bigger fields, because here you get exactly both. This map only proves that it is possible to make massive fields without making them feel boring. You just have to plan them well. Even with fields reaching 20 or even 24 hectares, the map never feels empty, because the creator added trees and water reservoirs that break up the landscape and make sure there is always something going on while you work. Sure, workers might struggle with that a bit, but that is the trade-off. Thanks to it, those fields do not look like dead rectangles, but have their own character. The starting farm and machinery are a weaker point, because not everything works here. The farm you get at the start feels a bit rushed. A lot of equipment is left outside and the farm itself feels too empty. That is even more of a shame, because the map includes 4 farms and some of them are simply better. Personally, I like farm number 4 the most, and that is the one I would gladly choose as my own base, but that is already a matter of taste. What matters most though is what Lunow does best. And that is the fields. Their size, layout, and terrain shaping are all done really well here. So if you are looking for a map with massive fields, but one that does not become tiring because of emptiness and monotony, then Lunow is a very strong candidate. Rancho Fundo is the only South American representative in this ranking. There were a few interesting maps in that category, but in the end I chose this one because in my opinion it has the best atmosphere. And just like earlier with Mediterranean Italy, it was the atmosphere that played the biggest role in giving it such a high spot. You can immediately feel that this map has its own character and its own distinct style. That does not mean it is perfect, of course. My biggest issue is with the starting farm because it feels average at best. It is not bad, but on a map this strong you would expect something more interesting. Thankfully, what is slightly lacking in the farm itself is made up for by the entire surrounding environment. The creator took inspiration from certain regions of Brazil, and even though I have never been there myself, this is exactly how I could imagine it looking. On top of that, you get fields of practically every size, from small ones to truly massive ones. But what matters is that all of them were designed with thought behind them. They are not boring, they do not feel random, and they fit the rest of the map very well. The same can be said about Rancho Fundo as a whole, because everything here sticks to one style and creates a very cohesive experience. Rancho Fundo will not be a map for everyone because it has a fairly specific atmosphere, but that is exactly why it belongs in this ranking. It is a map that brings something completely different to the list than everything else. Szpakowo is a map whose high placement might come as a surprise to some people. It is fairly flat, and with the smaller fields there are moments when it can feel a bit too empty around you. However, there is one element that completely changes how this map feels, and that is the farms. Officially, there are 3 playable farms here, and each of them is genuinely very well designed, both in terms of appearance and functionality. What matters is that it is not only the farms we can actually play on that leave an impression, but also the static ones. And that is exactly what makes this map stand out so much compared to many other maps. Very often, creators completely neglect this and just throw in a few identical houses or repetitive farm buildings without much thought. Here, it is the opposite. Even if you do not see neighbors working in the fields, you can still feel the spirit of these farms and of the whole area. Even though there are officially only 3 farms here, you can easily find many more places where you would actually want to start your own playthrough. On top of that, there are plenty of animal enclosures and an overall attention to detail that makes this map feel truly alive. On many large maps, sooner or later, you come across places that feel rushed, empty, or simply artificial. Here, I almost never had that impression, and that is exactly why this map deserves such a high spot. Daheim won me over with its simplicity. It is a small map, but it has a fantastic atmosphere, and right away you can tell that everything here was made with real thought behind it. The inspiration from rural areas of central Germany really works, because the whole map feels cohesive and very pleasing to the eye. 2 atmospheric villages, fields surrounding them, and buildings that look like a natural part of the map rather than something forced in. This is not a map for fans of huge open spaces and massive machines, but rather for those who appreciate a calmer, more classic atmosphere. Despite its small size, it does not lack farms, animals, and places that give it character. The biggest strength of Daheim, though, is that this map does not try to be something it is not. It does not try to impress with size or the number of attractions. Instead, it focuses on atmosphere, cohesion, and simple enjoyment of the game, and that is exactly why it stays in your memory so well. If you are looking for a map built around small farms, then you have just found it. Sure, not everyone has to like its atmosphere, but to me it is simply very cozy, and that is the word that describes it best. This is a map where no matter where you are, there is almost always something to catch your eye. Wherever you look, something is going on. A patch of forest, a dirt road, a water reservoir, small details in the background. Because of that, the world never feels empty or lifeless. Someone could say that with a map of this size, it would be hard to mess up the use of space, but I have seen plenty of similar maps where the terrain was either poorly planned or just plain boring. That problem does not exist here. Everything is laid out in a way that makes this map both enjoyable to drive around and enjoyable to look at. It feels calm, atmospheric, and very pleasant. The previous maps were smaller, so someone could say that at that size it is easier to avoid boredom and emptiness. Birgland, however, is on a completely different scale, and despite that, everything here is wonderfully varied. A lot of that comes from the different elevation levels, because they are what make the map feel smaller than it actually is, and that is exactly what I think is brilliant. What leaves an even bigger impression though is the overall finishing quality of this map. You only need to look at the biogas plant, for example. It does not look like a building placed in a hurry and thrown somewhere at random, but like a place that was genuinely well integrated into the surroundings and planned in a sensible way. The exact same thing can be said about the dirt roads, which are varied and once again make it clear that this map has its own character rather than just being a collection of random elements. And finally, first place, which without any hesitation goes to Geistal. With practically every earlier map, I had to think about exactly where to place it, but here I had absolutely no doubts. This is my clear number one. When it comes to looks and sheer scenery, this map is almost perfect to me. The inspiration from Bavaria and Austria is visible at every step. Steep climbs, beautifully laid out roads, and countless great views make this one of those maps where at times you feel more like admiring it than actually working on it. The biggest strength of Geistal is that it does not impress with just one element, but with the whole package. There are tons of fields and meadows, a huge number of forests, farms, productions, sell points, rivers, and ponds, yet nothing feels forced in. Everything is cohesive, polished, and naturally fits into the surroundings. You can really feel the scale, the vision, and the attention to detail. Everything has its place here, and that is exactly why I put it in first place. Because this is not just a very good map. This is a map that shows how truly beautiful and polished Farming Simulator 25 projects should be made. That is all from me for today. Make sure to write your own ranking in the comments and let me know whether you agree with my choice for first place. I will pin heart the most interesting comments. See you soon!